Have you ever wondered what goes through the mind of a 71-year-old man when he decides to face his greatest fears in a completely abandoned city, accompanied only by his war dog? My name is Frank Morrison, a Vietnam War veteran, and at 71 years old, I still take on challenges that would make 20-year-olds think twice before attempting. 6 months ago, I received a challenge that would completely change my perspective on courage, loyalty, and the limits of human survival. The proposal was simple, yet terrifying. Spend 30 hours alone in the ghost town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, the same town that inspired the film Silent Hill, where the underground has been burning for over 60 years, and only a few brave souls still dare to walk its deserted streets. With me would be my only faithful companion, Rex, a 6-year-old German Shepherd trained for combat and extreme survival situations. Have you ever been there? That feeling of needing to prove something to yourself, even when everyone around you tells you to act your age? Well, that was exactly what I was experiencing. With decades of military experience and countless survival challenges, I thought I'd faced everything life could throw at me. But Centralia was different. It wasn't just any ordinary abandoned town. It was a place where the very ground smoldered with toxic fumes, where empty houses told stories of families who fled in haste, leaving behind memories and an atmosphere steeped in mystery. Preparation for this challenge began weeks in advance. Every piece of equipment was carefully selected, every survival strategy reviewed. Rex and I trained tirelessly, further strengthening our years-long partnership. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what would happen at 3 a.m. that second day. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you about the limits of human endurance, the importance of having a trustworthy partner by your side, and most importantly, how age can be just a number when it comes to facing our greatest fears. When we arrived in Centralia that sunny October morning, the contrast was surreal. During the day, the town seemed like just another abandoned rural community with its empty houses and streets cracked by the ravages of time. But Rex knew something was different. His keen instincts picked up signals my human senses couldn't yet perceive. The first 12 hours passed relatively smoothly. We established our base in a building that appeared structurally sound, far from the toxic vapors erupting from underground. Searching for drinking water and organizing our equipment took up much of the afternoon, while Rex constantly patrolled our perimeter, displaying a level of alertness I'd rarely seen from him. But as the sun began to set over Centralia, everything changed. The atmosphere became dense, almost palpable, and it was then that I began to understand why this city had become a legend among the most seasoned urban explorers. What lay ahead would test not only my physical endurance, but especially my mental strength on a night that would mark me forever. As darkness descended on Centralia, I noticed Rex was restless in a way I'd never seen before. His ears remained constantly alert, picking up sounds my veteran ears couldn't detect. It was as if he knew exactly what awaited us in the coming hours, while I still struggled to grasp the full extent of the challenge I'd accepted. Right now, as I share this story with you, I can't help but think about how many people go through life without ever testing their true limits. How many of us, regardless of age, carry fears we never dare face? If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with the most challenging situation you've ever faced. It could have been something physical, emotional, or even a fear you overcame. Your story may inspire others watching right now. The truth is that every comment, every like you leave here, every new subscription to the channel means much more than numbers to me. It represents a community of courageous people who believe that our age, our physical condition, or our limitations shouldn't stop us from experiencing extraordinary adventures. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content. People who may need a little push to step out of their comfort zone. If you're enjoying this journey with Rex and me, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we still have a long way to go in this story. What happened in the next few hours in Centralia will show that the partnership between a man and his dog can be much deeper and more life-saving than we imagine. Returning to that haunted night, as the hours passed, I began to understand why Centralia had such a sinister reputation among even the most seasoned explorers. It wasn't just the underground flames that had burned for decades, or the toxic fumes rising from the cracked ground. It was something more subtle, more disturbing, an energy that seemed to whisper stories of all those who once called this place home. Rex kept circling our makeshift shelter, sniffing the air with an intensity that made me increasingly tense. Around 11 p.m., he began to emit a low, barely audible but constant growl. It was as if he were communicating with me in a language only years of partnership could teach. Something was approaching, something my human senses couldn't yet detect, but which Rex's primal instincts captured with absolute clarity. Before we continue with what really happened that night that changed my life forever, I need you to understand who I am and why. At 71 years old, I still accept challenges that most people would consider pure insanity. My name is Frank Morrison, and I was born in 1954 in a small town in rural Ohio, the son of a mechanic and a nurse. I grew up in a time when men took matters into their own hands, and when a given word was worth more than any signed contract. At 18, I was drafted to serve in the Vietnam War. I won't lie to you, they were the most difficult and transformative 2 years of my life. I saw things no young person should ever have to experience. Lost friends who were like brothers, and returned home with emotional baggage that would take decades to fully process. But I also learned lessons about survival, mental toughness, and teamwork that shaped the man I became. During my youth in the military, I worked primarily with military dogs. I was responsible for training and caring for the German shepherds that accompanied us on reconnaissance and patrol missions. It was there that I developed a special connection with these extraordinary animals, understanding that the partnership between a man and a well-trained dog can mean the difference between life and death in extreme situations. After the war, I returned to the United States and spent the next 30 years working as a survival instructor for various government agencies. I trained soldiers, FBI agents, rescue teams, and even some civilians seeking to develop survival skills in hostile environments. Throughout these decades, I never lost my passion for challenges that tested my physical and mental limits. When I officially retired at 65, many people thought I'd finally settle down, buy a rocking chair, and spend the rest of my days watching television. What a monumental mistake. It was quite the opposite. Free from professional responsibilities, I began to take on even more extreme challenges, always accompanied by canine companions who became not just adventure companions, but true brothers in arms. Rex came into my life 6 years ago when he was just an 8-week-old German Shepherd puppy. From day one, I knew there was something special about that little dog. His eyes revealed a keen intelligence and determination rarely seen, even in well-trained adult dogs. I decided he would be my next adventure partner, and I began his training immediately. Rex's training was intensive and comprehensive. In addition to basic obedience commands, he learned specific survival techniques, tracking, danger detection, search and rescue, and even some combat skills that might be needed in extreme situations. We spent at least 6 hours a day training, creating a bond that transcended the normal owner-pet relationship. Today, Rex weighs approximately 90 pounds of pure muscle and determination. His dark, dense coat protects him from extreme temperatures. His paws are strong enough to walk over rocky and uneven terrain for hours without injury, and his senses are so keen that he can detect dangers I never dreamed existed. Most importantly, he has learned to trust me completely, just as I trust him completely. Over the past 6 years, Rex and I have faced challenges that would test the mettle of adventurers half my age. We've spent an entire week in the Colorado mountains during the harshest winter in decades, survived 72 hours in the Arizona desert with minimal water, explored uncharted caves in Kentucky for 3 consecutive days, and even camped in a haunted Maine forest where at least 12 people have mysteriously disappeared over the past 50 years. Each of these challenges taught me something new about physical endurance, mental strength, and the importance of having a reliable partner. But it also showed me that age, contrary to what society would have us believe, can actually be an advantage in survival situations. At 71, I have a patience I didn't have at 20, a capacity for analysis that only decades of experience can provide, and a serenity in the face of danger that comes only from those who have faced death many times and learned to respect it without fear. Of course, my body isn't the same as it was when I was 25. My knees ache after long walks, my vision isn't perfect anymore, and I need more recovery time between intense workouts. But I've learned to work with these limitations, transforming them into strategies. Where I once relied solely on brute strength, I now use intelligence and planning. Where I once took unnecessary risks, I now calculate every move with mathematical precision. Rex, for his part, seems to perfectly understand these changes in my body. and has adapted his behavior accordingly. He gives me more time to rest when needed, is more alert to potential dangers when he senses I'm tired, and has developed an almost telepathic ability to anticipate my needs before I even realize I need something. Preparation for each challenge is meticulous and detailed. I spend weeks studying the chosen location, analyzing topographic maps, weather conditions, local wildlife, available resources, water sources, natural shelters, and all potential hazards we might face. I create multiple contingency plans for different possible scenarios and practice with Rex on specific situations that may arise during our adventure. My gear has also evolved over the years. Each item in my backpack has been tested in real-world conditions and has a specific, indispensable function. I don't carry anything superfluous, but I also refuse to go out without the essentials that can make the difference between success and failure, between safety and danger. Rex also has his own gear, a special collar with integrated GPS, protective boots for difficult terrain, and even a vest with pockets where he carries some basic supplies. But beyond all the equipment and technical preparation, what truly sets us apart is our mental and emotional connection. Over the years, Rex and I have developed a form of communication that goes far beyond verbal commands or simple gestures. We can understand each other through looks, subtle changes in body posture, and even through sensations I can't explain rationally. It's as if we share a sixth sense that allows us to anticipate each other's reactions in situations of extreme stress. This connection was fundamental in all our previous adventures, but it would be absolutely crucial in the Centralia Challenge. Because unlike the other places where we tested our limits, Centralia wasn't just a physically challenging environment. It was a place charged with history, mystery, and an energy that even the most staunch skeptics admitted was unsettling. The town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, has a unique and fascinating history. Founded in 1866, it once had over 2,000 residents who made their living primarily from coal mining. For decades, it was a prosperous and close-knit community where entire families dedicated their lives to working in the underground mines that stretched for miles below the surface. Everything changed in 1962 when a fire broke out in an abandoned coal mine. What should have been a localized and easily controllable problem turned into a catastrophe that continues to this day, more than 60 years later. The underground fire spread through interconnected coal seams, creating a network of flames that made it impossible to extinguish completely. Over the following decades, the federal government spent millions of dollars trying to control the fire, but all attempts failed. The situation became progressively more dangerous for residents. The ground began to crack, releasing toxic gases like carbon monoxide. Underground temperatures reached levels that melted the asphalt on the streets. Entire homes began to sink due to the unstable ground. In 1984, the government took the drastic decision to forcibly relocate all remaining residents. The town was officially condemned and removed from all postal maps. Today, only a few stubborn people remain on their properties, refusing to abandon the place they call home, even though they know the risks involved. The result is a surreal landscape that looks like something out of a post-apocalyptic horror film. Empty houses with broken windows, cracked streets spewing toxic vapor, dead vegetation, and an unsettling silence broken only by the occasional sound of gases escaping from underground. It's a place where nature and human activity have collided so violently that they've created something completely new and hauntingly beautiful in its desolation. For many urban explorers and paranormal enthusiasts, Centralia has become something of a must-see pilgrimage. Thousands of people visit the ghost town every year, drawn by the morbid curiosity of seeing a place where hell itself seems to have emerged from the Earth's surface. Most of these visitors spend a few hours photographing the ruins and leave before nightfall, when the atmosphere becomes truly oppressive. But I wasn't interested in a quick tourist visit. My goal was to spend a full 30 hours in Centralia, testing not only my physical survival skills but also my psychological resilience in an environment that challenges our normal perception of reality. I wanted to understand how a place can retain the memory of its former inhabitants, how history can literally emerge from the ground in the form of heat and smoke. The specific preparation for Centralia required special care that wasn't necessary for other challenges. In addition to the usual survival gear, I needed to include toxic gas masks, a portable carbon monoxide detector, boots with extra heat-resistant soles, and specific medical supplies for potential chemical fume poisoning. For Rex, I provided special boots that would protect his paws from the heated ground and a customized canine mask in case he needed to cross areas with high gas concentrations. I also spent weeks studying the accounts of other explorers who had visited Centralia, trying to identify patterns in the strange phenomena many reported experiencing. Unexplained lights, sounds that didn't seem to have a physical origin, sensations of being watched, sudden changes in temperature that couldn't be explained by underground fires alone. Of course, my natural skepticism made me question the veracity of many of these accounts, but my military experience taught me to always be prepared for the unexpected. The psychological aspect of the preparation was perhaps the most complex. Centralia is not only a physically challenging place, it is a place fraught with melancholy and loss. Each abandoned house represents a family forced to leave behind decades of memories and achievements. Each empty street echoes with the voices of children who played there before the underground fire transformed their childhood paradise into a perpetual nightmare. Rex seemed to sense the difference between this challenge and the previous ones. During the days of preparation, he demonstrated a level of alertness I had rarely observed. He stayed closer to me, responded to commands with even greater precision, and developed a habit of constantly checking our home, as if memorizing every detail of our safe territory before we set off for a place where safety would be only a temporary illusion. The night before leaving for Centralia, I spent hours mentally reviewing every aspect of the challenge. I checked and rechecked every item of equipment, confirmed the entry and exit routes, established landmarks I would use for nighttime navigation, and even wrote a detailed letter explaining my motivations in case something went wrong and others needed to understand why a 71-year-old man had voluntarily chosen to spend more than a day in a haunted ghost town. The truth is, that night before departure, I felt a genuine pang of fear for the first time in years. Not physical fear, which is something I learned to control decades ago, but a deeper kind of apprehension that came from some primal place in my mind. It was as if a part of me knew that Centralia would be unlike anything Rex and I had faced before, and that we would emerge transformed in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Rex slept restlessly that night, waking several times and looking at me with an expression that mixed confidence and concern. It was as if he were asking me if I was absolutely sure we wanted to do this, if I'd considered all the possible consequences of our decision. And honestly, looking back, I think Rex had reason to be worried, because what happened in Centralia exceeded even my wildest expectations of what a place can do to the human mind when all normal markers of civilization and safety are removed. The morning of our departure for Centralia dawned with a gray sky that seemed to foreshadow what awaited us. I woke at 5 in the morning, as I always do before any important mission, and found Rex already awake, sitting beside my bed with that watchful gaze I knew so well. It was as if he instinctively knew this would be no ordinary day, that we were about to embark on an adventure that would test every boundary we had established over our 6 years of partnership. The challenge I had accepted had specific, strict rules that could not be broken under any circumstances. For exactly 30 hours, Rex and I were to remain within the confines of the ghost town of Centralia, using only the resources we could carry in our backpacks and whatever we could find or improvise on site. There would be no outside communication, no possibility of early rescue, and no excuses or justifications that would allow us to abandon the challenge before the established deadline. The rules were simple but absolute. He could carry a backpack weighing no more than 25 kilograms, including enough water for a maximum of 12 hours, considering that finding safe drinking water sources in Centralia would be virtually impossible due to groundwater contamination from gases and chemicals released by the underground fire. Rex would have his own backpack with 8 kilograms of basic supplies, including concentrated dog food, protective gear, and some first aid items specifically for dogs. Electronic equipment was permitted only for safety and documentation purposes. I would carry a basic GPS, a portable toxic gas detector, a rugged camera to record key moments of the experience, and an emergency device that could only be activated in the event of imminent risk of death. Any use of this last device would mean automatic failure of the challenge, something I was determined to avoid at all costs. Gear selection was a process that took weeks of meticulous planning. Each item needed to justify its weight and space in the backpack, ideally serving multiple functions. My survival knife, for example, would serve not only as a cutting tool but also as a pry bar, a makeshift hammer, and even a signaling mirror if needed. My military tarp could function as a shelter, a blanket, a rainwater collection container, or an emergency stretcher if Rex were injured. For Rex, I provided special boots with extra heat-resistant rubber soles, considering that the ground in many parts of Centralia reaches temperatures that can cause severe burns within seconds of direct contact. He would also wear a custom canine mask, originally developed for police dogs working in tear gas environments, but which would be essential if we needed to traverse areas with high concentrations of carbon monoxide or other toxic fumes. The issue of nutrition was particularly challenging. With limited space in my backpack, I had to calculate exactly the minimum amount of calories needed to maintain our energy during 30 hours of intense activity. I opted for concentrated protein bars, nuts, dried fruit, and some glucose tablets for hypoglycemia emergencies. For Rex, in addition to his usual concentrated ration, I included some special treats he loved, and that could serve as a psychological reward in moments of extreme stress. Water was our biggest concern. Even carrying the maximum amount possible, we knew it wouldn't last a full 30 hours, especially considering that the heat emanating from Centralia's subsurface would significantly increase our rate of dehydration. My strategy was to carefully ration what we carried, while actively searching for alternative sources that could be purified through boiling or purification tablets. Medical equipment included bandages, disinfectant, basic pain relievers, medications for respiratory problems that could be caused by inhaling toxic fumes, and a specific antidote for carbon monoxide poisoning. For Rex, I brought basic veterinary supplies, including an eye wash solution in case he was exposed to chemical irritants, and a mild sedative that might be needed if he panicked due to extreme sensory input. The choice of temporary shelter would be crucial to our survival. Through aerial photographs and reports from other explorers, I identified 3 possible locations that might offer adequate protection. An abandoned house on the eastern edge of town that appeared structurally sound, an old school that, despite visible damage, still had its roof intact, and a small industrial warehouse slightly removed from the area with the most geothermal activity. Each of these options had specific advantages and disadvantages. The house would offer better protection from the elements, but it was located in an area where several explorers had reported disturbing paranormal experiences. The school had multiple emergency exits, which would be a tactical advantage, but it was very close to a fissure in the ground from which toxic gases constantly emanated. The industrial warehouse was in the safest location in terms of chemical contamination, but its metal structure could become an oven during the day due to the underground heat. After carefully considering all factors, I decided we would visit all 3 locations during the first hours of daylight, assessing the actual conditions at each location before making a final decision on where to establish our base of operations. Flexibility and adaptation were key, considering that conditions in Centralia can change dramatically in a matter of hours. Mental preparation was perhaps the most complex aspect of the entire process. Unlike our previous challenges in natural environments, Centralia represented a unique type of psychological adversity. It wasn't just a matter of surviving extreme weather conditions or resource scarcity. It was a test of mental endurance in a place where reality itself seems distorted, where human senses are constantly bombarded by stimuli that challenge our normal understanding of the world. I spent weeks practicing meditation and breathing control techniques I learned during my military training, but adapted specifically for situations of prolonged psychological stress. I developed mental exercises that would allow me to maintain focus and clarity of thought, even when confronted with phenomena that might seem supernatural or inexplicable. The key was to never allow fear or confusion to compromise my ability to make rational decisions based on concrete evidence. Rex also required special preparation for this challenge. Over the course of weeks, I gradually exposed him to disturbing sensory stimuli. Strange sounds played at high volumes, synthetic chemical odors, sudden temperature changes, and even flashing lights that simulated some of the phenomena reported in Centralia. The goal was to partially desensitize him, ensuring he wouldn't panic when confronted with the real conditions we would encounter. We also extensively trained in emergency commands that might be needed in specific situations in Centralia. Rex learned to recognize signs that would indicate the presence of toxic gases, to avoid areas of the ground that were visibly heated, and to alert me immediately if he detected any changes in the environment that could pose imminent danger. His natural detection ability would be amplified by this specific training. transforming him into a veritable mobile early warning system. The drive to Centralia took approximately 4 hours, during which I maintained a contemplative silence, mentally reviewing every aspect of the plan we'd developed. Rex remained quiet in the back seat, but I could feel his tension growing as we approached our destination. It was as if he could sense through subtle cues that we were headed for something completely different from our previous adventures. As we approached the Centralia area, the landscape around the road began to show signs of the devastation wrought by the underground fire. Entire swaths of forest were dead or severely damaged. The ground in some spots showed visible cracks from which small plumes of steam were escaping, and the air itself seemed to carry a distinct chemical odor that grew in intensity with each passing kilometer. I parked my vehicle in a safe spot, approximately 2 kilometers before the official boundaries of the ghost town. The hike to Centralia would be our first leg, an opportunity to gradually acclimate to the conditions we would encounter over the next 30 hours. I loaded my 25-kilogram backpack, checked that Rex was comfortable with his gear, and we began our final march toward what would be the most intense challenge of our lives. The first glimpse of Centralia from afar was both fascinating and unsettling. The town stretched out in a small natural depression between low hills, and even from a distance, plumes of steam could be seen rising from various points on the ground. The remaining structures of houses and buildings created jagged silhouettes against the cloudy sky, resembling broken teeth in a gigantic mouth. As we approached, the effects of the underground fire became increasingly evident and impressive. The asphalt on some streets was literally melted, creating wavy, shiny shapes that looked like rivers of solidified tar. In other spots, large cracks in the ground constantly released vapors that ranged from nearly transparent white to sulfurous yellow, depending on the chemical composition of the gases escaping from the depths. Rex began showing signs of discomfort when we were still a few hundred meters from the first abandoned structure. His nostrils flared constantly, processing a complex mixture of odors that likely included chemicals he'd never encountered before. His movements became more cautious, each step carefully calculated as if he were navigating an invisible minefield. The silence in Centralia was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't simply the absence of human sounds or urban traffic. It was a kind of stillness that seemed to absorb even the natural noises that normally fill any outdoor environment. There was no bird song, no insects buzzing, no rustling of leaves rustling in the wind. It was as if the very life had been drained from the place, leaving only the eerie sounds of gases escaping from underground. Our first stop was the house I'd identified as a potential shelter. Up close, it was clear it wouldn't be suitable for our purposes. In addition to visible structural damage to the walls and foundation, the ground surrounding the building was visibly heated, with small cracks from which vapors my portable detector identified as potentially toxic were escaping. Rex steadfastly refused to approach the entrance, demonstrating an instinct for self-preservation that I decided to fully respect. The old school proved equally unsuitable, but for different reasons. Although structurally more solid than the house, its location near one of the city's largest geothermal fissures made it virtually uninhabitable. The level of toxic gases in the area was dangerously high, requiring the constant use of protective masks that significantly limited our mobility and ability to communicate. Then we arrived at the industrial warehouse, our third and final predetermined option. Located on the southeastern edge of Centralia, the building was approximately 50 feet long by 26 feet wide, constructed primarily of steel framing and masonry walls. More importantly, it was located on a slightly elevated area where geothermal activity was less intense, resulting in lower levels of air pollution. Rex demonstrated much greater comfort in this location, exploring the shed's surroundings with cautious curiosity, but without the signs of extreme stress he had shown in the other locations. His behavior was a decisive factor in my choice, considering that his superior sensory capacity could detect dangers that I couldn't consciously perceive. The interior of the warehouse was surprisingly well preserved. Some windows were broken, allowing natural ventilation that would have been crucial to prevent gas buildup, but the roof was intact, and the walls offered adequate protection from wind and potential precipitation. The concrete floor, though cracked in places, was structurally sound and showed no signs of excessive heating. We established our base of operations in the southwest corner of the warehouse, the area that offered the best protection from prevailing winds and had easy access to 2 separate emergency exits. I laid out my military tarp as additional insulation against the cold floor, arranged our supplies so they could be quickly located even in complete darkness, and established a security perimeter that Rex could patrol without straying too far from our base. During those first hours of preparation, sunlight filtered through the heavy clouds provided adequate illumination for our activities. But I knew that when darkness fell, Centralia would completely transform. Every account I had studied unanimously described how the ghost town took on a completely different atmosphere after sunset, when the underground vapors became more visible and the strange sounds intensified dramatically. Rex spent the entire afternoon on high alert, constantly scanning our perimeter and reacting to stimuli I couldn't detect. Occasionally, he would stop abruptly during his patrols, staring in a specific direction and maintaining a posture of attention that indicated he'd detected something significant. When I tried to pinpoint what had caught his attention, I couldn't discern anything beyond the constant plumes of steam and the occasional creak of metal structures expanding and contracting due to temperature fluctuations. Our first meal in Centralia was a strange and unsettling experience. Even though we knew the food we brought was safe and nutritious, there was something about the environment that affected even the most basic appetite. The chemical-laden air altered the flavor of everything we put in our mouths, and the constant awareness that we were literally sitting over an underground fire that had been burning for decades added a disturbing psychological dimension to something as fundamental as eating. Rex also demonstrated initial difficulty accepting his kibble, carefully sniffing each piece before eating it. His behavior didn't indicate anything was wrong with the food, but rather that all his instincts were on hypervigilance, making even routine activities require additional safety checks. As the afternoon wore on, I began to notice subtle but significant changes in the atmosphere around us. The pattern of vapors rising from the ground seemed to intensify, the columns becoming denser and more visible. The sounds also changed, with a gradual increase in what seemed to be crackling and groaning sounds coming from beneath the earth, as if the rocks themselves were protesting the constant heat that had consumed them for decades. It was during these first, relatively calm 12 hours that we established our survival routine and began to adapt to Centralia's unique environment. But I knew the true test was yet to come. When the sun finally set and darkness descended on the ghost town, Rex and I would face challenges that would test not only our physical endurance, but, more importantly, our mental and emotional stability. Preparations were complete, our base established, and our resources optimally organized. Now all that remained was to wait for nightfall and discover if all our years of training and experience would be enough to survive what Centralia had in store for those brave or foolish enough to remain in its domain after sunset. The moment we officially reached the edge of Centralia was marked by a sensation I can't adequately describe. It was as if we'd crossed an invisible barrier separating the normal world from what I can only call an alternate reality. The air completely changed its texture and composition, becoming denser and charged with an energy that made the hairs on my arms constantly stand on end. Rex stopped abruptly at the unofficial entrance to the city, his nostrils flaring furiously as he processed an avalanche of olfactory information I hadn't even dreamed existed. The first thing that truly struck me was the surreal contrast between the devastating beauty of the landscape and the complete absence of life. Over decades of working in extreme environments, I had grown accustomed to places where human life was difficult or impossible, but there was always some sign that nature found a way to adapt and survive. In Centralia, this fundamental rule of biology seemed to have been completely suspended. There wasn't a single bird flying overhead, not a single sign of small mammals, not a single blade of grass growing in the areas most affected by the underground fire. The silence that pervaded the ghost town was unlike anything I had experienced in over 5 decades of life. It wasn't simply the absence of urban noise or the kind of stillness one finds in secluded forests in the wee hours. It was a silence that seemed to have a physical substance, as if the air itself were thicker and muffled sounds that should naturally exist. When I spoke to Rex, my voice sounded strange and distorted, as if echoing through a very long underground tunnel. Rex displayed immediate signs of discomfort that were completely unlike any behavior I had observed from him during our years of partnership. His movements became deliberately slow and calculated, each step carefully tested before he fully transferred his weight. His ears remained in constant rotation, picking up sounds that my human ears simply couldn't detect. Even more disturbing was the way he constantly glanced over his shoulder, as if something were following us from a distance only his heightened senses could perceive. Centralia's topography had been dramatically altered by decades of underground geothermal activity. Streets that were originally flat and straight now featured undulations and depressions caused by the collapse of mining tunnels. In some spots, the asphalt had literally melted and solidified again, creating formations reminiscent of volcanic lava. In other places, large fissures in the ground constantly released vapors that ranged from clear to greenish yellow, depending on the chemical composition of the gases escaping from deep within the earth. What struck me most during our initial approach was how dramatically the ambient temperature varied over very short distances. We could be walking in an area where the temperature was relatively normal for the season, and suddenly, as we approached a fissure in the ground, the heat would become almost unbearable. My handheld detector recorded variations of more than 20 degrees Celsius over spaces of just a few meters. Rex quickly learned to identify these zones of intense heat, automatically diverting our route whenever it detected signs of excessive ground heating. One of the most striking sights was an ancient church that remained standing in the center of the most devastated area. Its stone structure had withstood the most destructive effects of the underground fire, but the stained glass windows had cracked symmetrically, creating kaleidoscopic patterns that fragmented the sunlight filtered through the heavy clouds. In some homes, through broken windows, furniture could be seen still in its original positions, covered in decades of dust and debris. Gardens that had once been carefully maintained now displayed only the withered skeletons of plants that had died when the soil became too toxic to sustain any form of plant life. The most disturbing aspect of the landscape were the children's toys occasionally scattered throughout the streets and yards. Rusty bicycles, dolls faded from exposure to the sun, and chemicals, playground swings that creaked ominously whenever a strong gust of wind blew through the area. These objects served as silent reminders that Centralia was once a vibrant community, where families put down roots and built dreams that were brutally cut short by the subterranean catastrophe. Rex seemed especially sensitive to these traces of previous human occupation. During our initial exploration, my portable toxic gas detector constantly sounded alerts. The levels of carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and other dangerous chemicals varied significantly depending on wind direction, time of day, and proximity to the most active fissures in the ground. I quickly learned to identify patterns in the detector's alerts, developing a mental map of the safest areas and those we should avoid completely. Rex quickly adapted to the water restrictions, accepting smaller rations without showing any signs of undue discomfort. His natural discipline, developed through years of rigorous training, proved crucial in ensuring our limited supplies lasted as long as possible. He also developed the habit of alerting me whenever he detected moisture in the air or signs of condensation that could be collected to supplement our supplies. When I arrived at the site to investigate why Rex had shown such interest, I discovered that his choice was based on safety criteria that my purely logical analysis had overlooked. The building was a former tool shed belonging to one of the abandoned residential properties. Its location on a natural elevation provided adequate drainage, preventing the accumulation of heavier-than-air gases. He carefully sniffed every surface, tested the stability of the floor with his paws, and even checked the ventilation openings to ensure there were no obstructions that could compromise air circulation. His instinctive analysis of the site was far more comprehensive and accurate than my initial technical assessment. The warehouse's interior was surprisingly well preserved. I chose the northeast corner as a rest area, where the combination of wind protection and proximity to one of the ventilation openings created more comfortable conditions for recovery periods. The opposite corner would become our food preparation and equipment maintenance area, taking advantage of the natural light that entered through a small but strategically placed window. The afternoon wore on slowly, and I began to realize how different the temporal rhythm in Centralia was from any other place I had experienced. Without the normal visual and auditory markers of human activity, the natural movement of wildlife, and with the sun frequently obscured by clouds laden with chemical vapors, time seemed to flow in a distorted fashion. Moments stretched out like hours, while periods that felt long turned out to be surprisingly brief when I checked my watch. As the day progressed toward what would be one of the most intense nights of our lives, I began to notice subtle but significant changes in the atmosphere around our base. The vapors rising from fissures in the ground seemed to intensify, becoming denser and more visible. The subterranean sounds, which during the day were only an occasional whisper, began to gradually amplify, creating an eerie symphony of cracks, groans, and muffled roars emanating from deep within the earth. It was during these late afternoon hours that I began to experience the first manifestations of what I can only describe as Centralia's unique psychological influence. Despite all my experience in extreme environments and high-stress situations, I found my mind reacting in unexpected ways to the ghost town environment. Thoughts I could normally easily control began to become intrusive and persistent. Rex also showed initial hesitation about eating his kibble, sniffing each portion carefully before accepting it was safe to eat. The experience of being in Centralia during those first hours made me understand why so many explorers described the place as something beyond a mere abandoned town. There was a quality in the air, an energy in the atmosphere, a presence that I couldn't scientifically define, but that was undeniably real. Centralia's true nature, its most disturbing and inexplicable characteristics, only emerged when darkness descended upon the devastated landscape. Rex seemed instinctively aware of this impending transition. As the shadows began to lengthen, his posture became even more tense, his senses reaching a level of alert I had rarely observed even during our most intense training. The subterranean sounds intensified, transforming into a constant cacophony that seemed to emanate from every inch of the ground beneath our feet. It was in this moment of transition between day and night that I fully grasped the magnitude of the challenge Rex and I had undertaken. Centralia wasn't simply a test of physical survival or endurance in extreme environmental conditions. It was a direct confrontation with something much deeper and more disturbing, an experience that would test the very limits of our sanity and understanding of reality. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the hills surrounding the ghost town, I braced myself for what would be the longest, most intense night of my life. Despite extensively studying other explorers' accounts and analyzing every technical aspect of the environment, I discovered that no amount of theoretical planning could truly prepare one for the visceral reality of living in a city where the very ground has been burning for over 6 decades. During the early morning hours, I devoted considerable time to establishing routines that would be crucial to our survival over the next 30 hours. Rex and I developed a patrol system that allowed us to constantly monitor our security perimeter while conserving energy for the challenges we knew awaited us when darkness fell. He naturally took on the responsibility of detecting subtle changes in the environment that my human senses might miss, while I focused on tasks that required analytical reasoning and strategic planning. In other spots, just a few meters away, temperatures were surprisingly cool due to the shade created by abandoned structures and the complete absence of vegetation that would normally absorb and retain solar heat. Rex demonstrated an extraordinary ability to navigate these microclimatic variations, quickly developing a mental map of temperature zones that allowed him to choose routes that minimized our discomfort and exposure to potentially dangerous conditions. Water, which would normally be our first concern, was available only in the limited quantity we carried, making its conservation a matter of rigorous discipline rather than active pursuit of natural sources. Shelter, another crucial element, had been addressed through careful location selection, but required constant monitoring due to the unstable nature of the geological environment. The issue of feeding presented unexpected challenges that went beyond the simple availability of adequate nutrients. The chemically laden air significantly affected taste, making even the most familiar foods strangely different in flavor and texture. Rex initially demonstrated reluctance to consume his usual ration, not due to any issue with the food's quality, but apparently because all his survival instincts were on high alert. These reconnaissances also served as opportunities for Rex to exercise his muscles and keep his reflexes sharp, preventing the constant stress of the environment from leading to physical rigidity that could compromise his ability to react in emergency situations. Between reconnaissance missions, we dedicated time to meticulously maintaining our equipment. I carefully examined his paws, looking for signs of irritation or damage from contact with the chemically altered soil. I cleaned his eyes with a mild saline solution to remove any buildup of irritating particles, and brushed his coat to eliminate dust and debris that could carry toxic compounds. He patiently cooperated with this care, seeming to instinctively understand that his physical health would be crucial to our mutual survival during the remaining hours of the challenge. His behavior alerted me to the possibility that these fluctuations in underground activity could be precursors to more significant geological events that would pose a real threat to our safety. I used my measuring instruments to carefully monitor changes in environmental conditions during this episode. These measurements provided me with valuable insight into the dynamic nature of Centralia's environment, helping me develop more accurate criteria for assessing when conditions became genuinely dangerous versus simply uncomfortable. The episode lasted approximately 45 minutes before gradually returning to the baseline levels we had observed since our arrival. After returning to relatively normal conditions, I conducted a comprehensive assessment of how Rex and I had responded to our first significant test. We both maintained calm and discipline throughout the event, following safety protocols we had practiced during our preparatory training. Rex demonstrated excellent judgment by remaining alert but not panicking, while I was able to collect valuable data without compromising our safety. The experience significantly increased my confidence in our ability to manage unforeseen situations that might arise during the remaining hours of the challenge.